Hi everyone, warm welcome to today's webinar, titled The New Business Triangle, Cost, Quality and Carbon. Over the next 45 minutes, we'll be exploring why carbon is rapidly becoming a core measure of business performance alongside cost and quality. And today's session is being delivered by Ben Craig, Head of Partnerships and Business Development at carbonfit. So Ben has worked with organizations of all sizes across a range of sectors, helping them develop practical sustainability strategies that create measurable business value. So we're delighted to have him with us today to present this webinar. So just before we jump into the webinar itself, just a bit of housekeeping. So the webinar will last approximately 45 minutes and there'll be a 5-minute Q&A included at the end within that 45 minutes. Feel free to drop any of your questions into the chat during the webinar, and we'll collect them for the Q&A later and make sure that they get attended to. Also, just so that you're aware too, that there will be a recording going out of today's webinar early next week. So for any reason you have to pop off, or if you have to attend to anything, you'll be receiving that next week along with the slides. So with that being said, it's my pleasure to hand it over to Ben.
Thanks, Brona, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Big thank you to the Institute of Sustainability Studies for having me today. As Bruna said, my name's Ben. I am the head of partnerships at carbonfit. For those of you who've not come across carbonfit before, we are a specialist carbon consultancy and we work with organizations anecdotally to save money, make money, and stay out of jail by staying on the right side of regulation. And I suppose how do we do that is measuring, reporting, and reducing your carbon footprint. And over the next 45 minutes or so, I want to challenge the way that you think about carbon in your organization. Not as an environmental obligation, which hopefully you already think about a little bit. And if the weather that is gracing us on this island and across Europe at the moment doesn't give you pause for thought on climate change, hopefully the business metric that I'm going to introduce to you will give you real pause for thought around why your business really needs to take this seriously in the here and the now. So by the end of this session, you should have at least 3 things that you can do differently next week. And without further ado, let's get started. This is what we're going to cover today. 5 key areas. The first is the world that your business operates in. It's changed. I think anybody who has not noticed significant change in the world of business in the last 12 to 18 to 24 months has been under a rock somewhere. And you may have noticed that carbon is now becoming central to that change. I'll say a little bit more about that later on. Second of all, carbon has moved out of the sustainability team and into commercial conversations. Third, measurement is the only defensible position in a world of greenwashing scrutiny. We'll talk more about that later and the importance of trust. Fourth, what outperforming organizations do differently. And I have a real case study for you on that, which is really exciting and a great showcase of just what's possible when you start to put all of these pieces together. And fifth, the new business triangle, and it's what we've led with, which is cost, quality, and carbon. And we'll talk about more on that later. But I've got 6 key questions for you to take back to your organization. And yeah, dead excited to get stuck into all of this with you. And thank you everybody who has tuned in today. So let's go. So I want to start with a bit of provocation. If you think that the sustainability conversation is the same as it was 5 years ago, you're not keeping up. The external environment has shifted fundamentally for business. There are 5 forces now converging on almost every business that I work with, and that is regardless of sector or size. The intersection of those forces is creating either an opportunity or an existential risk or threat, depending on how prepared you are. So let me walk you through what those 5 forces are. First, AI disruption. Automation is compressing margins and shifting where value is created. The businesses that survive are those with defensible, evidence-based differentiation. Supply chain fragility. Geopolitical shocks are exposing huge hidden cost and carbon dependencies that businesses didn't know that they had. Iran, Ukraine, we can see these things and what they're doing to the cost of doing business, where our energy security is, what the cost of the groceries that we buy in the supermarkets are, because it hits fertilizers. We can see a huge range of different things. We can see crops not working in the fields because of what is going on in terms of our climate as well at the same time. So huge things going on in terms of supply chain fragility happening in different jurisdictions where we typically were able to get things. And it could just simply on, can we get our goods? Can we not get our goods? Are those goods available anymore? Are they not? Where is the cost coming in on all of that? So huge, huge issue there. Regulatory acceleration. Um, for the UK, PPN 0621 is in force for public sector suppliers. Anybody that's bidding over £5 million, you need to have a public procurement notice 0621 compliant carbon reduction plan, net zero commitment, and be transparently reporting on your scope 1 and 2 emissions and what you're doing on scope 3. The CSRD Omnibus is live. CBAM is live in the EU and is coming into effect in the UK in January 27. These are not proposals, they are law. These are regulations that we're needing to work within, and they're affecting who is winning business, who is not winning business, who is paying more to do business, and who is not. This is critical. Those that have caught up with this regulation and are turning it to their advantage are really reaping the rewards on that at this stage. Investor and lender scrutiny. Capital is now pricing ESG risk at source. Sustainability-linked lending rates reward verified performance, and that's critical to understand. If you want to have lower interest rates on the money that you borrow, you need to be showing how you are becoming less carbon intensive in what you do, and you need to be able to show that. So you want to be able to say, listen, I've installed some solar panels, they're doing a great job for me. That's not really enough. You need to say, I've installed solar panels, they are this size, they have reduced my energy consumption by this, and that has saved me this amount of money. Therefore, going forwards, I now want to invest in X, Y, and Z, which is going to take me further down that road. The metrics and the validation really, really matter here on that investor and lender scrutiny. You need to think about that, how you would think about a data room if you were looking for investment with a VC. What have you got in terms of due diligence? If they were to walk into your building right now, are you ready? Buyer expectations. This is upping significantly. Major procurement programs now score carbon performance as a condition of contract, similar to what I described in the public sector with PPN. They're just using different things. So it might be that you need to be SBTI certified. It might be that you need to be EcoVadis certified and you're moving from bronze to silver or silver to gold. It might be that you need to have a product carbon footprint or an EPD to showcase what actually is the impact of the product that they're buying from you and what you're doing to reduce it over time and how does it compare against your competitors. This is really, really important, and this is only going to increase. A lot of large companies had set targets to engage with 80% of their supply chain by 2025, 2026, 2027. We're reaching and passing all of those thresholds. And whilst you may have been now asked about that or may not have been asked about that, you will certainly be asked about it going forwards. And they will be starting to prioritize who they want to work with on that basis moving forwards because they now have reduction targets on those supply chain emissions beyond just engagement by 2030. We're getting very close to that. So people are wanting to really see who's moving on that so that they are less at risk themselves. Okay, so another stat for you here. About 38% of executives feel prepared for the disruption that is ahead. That's not very much. And that's coming from McKinsey's global survey on strategy and corporate finance. These are senior leaders with access to the best advisors in the world, and still 62% don't feel that they're ready. The gap between the rate of change in the external environment and organizations' readiness to respond is widening. You need to ask yourself honestly, are you in that 38%? And what does not ready cost you in practice? What does it cost you in lost business? What does it cost you in how much you're paying for energy? What does it cost you in terms of supply chain resilience or lack thereof? What does it cost you in terms of interest rates? What does it cost your business on a day-to-day basis? And that's a pretty scary position to be in. It's not crazy to feel pretty discombobulated by that, a bit at sea with that, and thinking, where the heck do I start here? This is really complex. And I suppose this is where we need to start to shift this conversation more towards what are the things that you are actually doing already that you just haven't put these pieces together. And I think that's part of the challenge here is this seems like it is a huge external pressure and challenge rather than something that actually we have a lot of the tools to begin to work with already. We just haven't kind of made the mental shift yet. So that mental shift, carbon has left the environment department. It is now revenue, cost, and risk and capital. Okay. And this is the big thing. Okay. So if you are still thinking, sustainability is something that the health and safety team do in your business, this is a compliance tick box exercise, you're really missing the point. This is about business competitiveness. This is about productivity. This is about de-risking your business and making it really hard-nosed in the world that is out there right now. It's critical that you make that shift in your mind to think about this in terms of what I described kind of at the start. How do you save money? How do you make money? How do you stay on the right side of regulation? Okay. Those three things are critical for any business to be exploring all the time. That's the domain of the CEO, the owner, the board, the CFO, the COO. This is where it really hits in terms of the executive team. Okay. Absolutely critical because this is an interconnected challenge that needs to be explored. And because of that, it actually becomes a significant opportunity to boost your business and really drive it forwards. And we'll dive into what that means in practice in a couple of slides' time. But the organizations that struggle most are the ones that are not yet grasping that, and the ones that are winning are where they have transitioned towards carbon is actually a commercial metric. It's tracked, it's reported, it's used in commercial decision making alongside revenue, cost, and risk. And that is the shift that I really want to explore with you all as we now move forward. So, carbon is a commercial metric. It's showing up in at least three distinct places, and let me be specific. Revenue. Carbon credentials, as I mentioned previously, now can determine whether you are in the pass go phase of making a bid, whether that's a PPN 0621 on the public sector, or whether you're kind of meeting those supplier requirements for large private sector corporates, where they're asking for product carbon footprints, or they're asking for your scope 1 and 2 emissions, or what's the material difference about what you are doing and where's the evidence for it. Then you have risk. This is the regulatory exposure. So this is where, as you start to move into new regulation like CSRD or the increasing regulation that's coming through in the UK around the shift to UK SRS, which is the Sustainability Reporting Standard, these are all starting to come in, and there is CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. So critical to understand, where does your business sit on its growth journey towards these different regulations? Are you planning for that? Are you organized for it? Really, really, really important. SECR, I don't know if anybody's come across that, but Streamlined Energy and Carbon Reporting sits alongside ESOS, Energy Savings Opportunity Scheme. These things are combining, and ultimately, this all comes from your carbon data. And this all hits revenue. It all hits whether you're going to have a fine or not. It all hits how sharp are you on exposing where the opportunities are for efficiency within your business. And I mentioned capital previously. That sustainability linked lending that is growing. Commercial teams in banks are actively looking to grow that area of their business. And by 2030, they have a significant job works to do to ensure that their most carbon intensive clients are on a transition journey towards a credible carbon reduction plan. And if not, they're going to start raising interest rates on those companies because they are of a higher risk than those that are reducing them. So this is really, really important to think about. What are the incentives? What are the sticks? What does it mean around capital, around risk, and around revenue? So reducing carbon almost always means reducing energy waste and operational cost. And these are not trade-offs, they are the same number. So um, I want you to consider within the room, does carbon show up as a commercial metric in your organization? Or is it something that goes into an annual report or into a sustainability report that gets published once a year? Nobody really pays much attention to it. It's just a compliance tick box. 80% of your carbon is outside your walls. For those of you that have not yet engaged in scope 3, this is critical. I mentioned it a little bit earlier. Okay, so in your supply chain, this is where a lot of your carbon intensive services are. This is where a lot of your exposure is. And if you haven't mapped that, you haven't really looked at what the opportunity for efficiency is, because that is significant. If you can reduce the amount of carbon going on in your supply chain, the efficiency opportunity is massive. But you need to know where that opportunity is, and that takes a little bit of work. Okay. Really, really, really important. And this matters because when organizations start their carbon journey, they focus on scope 1 and 2 in their own operations, which is the right place to start. But if you only focus on that, you're only managing 20% of the problem and you're ignoring 80% of the opportunity. So this is also why your customers, particularly those large corporates or the large public sector organizations, are increasingly asking you for your carbon data, because they are going on that journey to look at what is that efficiency opportunity, that de-risking opportunity for them as they start to move forwards. Evidence beats claims. Okay. I think everybody's fully aware of just what can be done in ChatGPT or in Claude or in you name the AI product. It's very quick and easy to generate something that may not stand up to any scrutiny. And if you are putting yourself out there in that way, there is legislation that is coming for you. The greenwashing legislation is for real, and setting that aside, corporates want to be assured of what they're buying into. Lenders want to be assured of what they're buying into. If they don't trust what it is that you're putting out there, or they find that it's not, that's really, really bad. So that's going to have a significantly negative effect on your business. And ultimately, you're fooling yourself within this as well. If you're just kind of putting stuff out there and it doesn't really mean anything, or it's not really based on anything, you're not actually optimizing your business in a way that's going to drive competitiveness, drive performance, and deliver the kind of productivity that you want to deliver within your organization that is going to hit that revenue, that cost, and that risk. So greenwashing scrutiny from regulators, investors, and buyers has now reached the point where a claim you cannot evidence is worse than saying nothing at all. So the organizations that are winning are those that can prove their performance, not just assert it. Going back to that example around, hey, we're great, we've installed some solar panels. They want to go, well, okay, give me some evidence. Show me what that has done to your energy bill. Show me what that has done to the amount of kilowatt hours that you consume, and show me how that fits into your plan for efficiency moving forwards. Really, really important to think about that evidence. The trust gap is real and it is widening. Studies consistently show that procurement professionals cannot verify the sustainability claims that their suppliers make. That is not a perception problem, it's a measurement problem. So in a world of greenwashing scrutiny from the FCA, the CMA, and the European Commission, an unverifiable claim is a commercial liability. It's not a safe position. So the organizations that solve this by producing verified, auditable carbon data are pulling ahead. And that's exactly what CSRD is asking you to do. So if you comply effectively with the kind of regs on reporting that are coming through, you're going to be insulated from this. You're going to be on the right side of it, but it does take some work. But without doing that work, you don't get the benefit of the insight that comes out the other side of it. And that's often the value that gets left on the table. It's that insight. What should we do? When should we do it? Are we moving forwards in a way that really drives business performance? So the shift, we are committed to net zero, to here is our independently verified baseline, is the single most important commercial move a business can make right now. Moving from, yes, we agree, yes, we want to do, to here is what we have done, here is who has checked our homework, and here's what we're going to go and do as we move forwards with the following assurances. Okay, that's what we're looking at. And I think that is the critical point for people to take home. So what outperforming organizations share? I want to spend just a couple of minutes on what I actually see in the organizations that are ahead of that curve, not theory, but practice. And the pattern is remarkably consistent, whether it's a large corporate with an SBTI commitment, or whether it's an SME trying to qualify for public sector tenders, or the organizations that are just kind of considering this for the first time and thinking about how do we become a really competitive organization, and they're incorporating this. Those organizations are sharing 6 behaviors that I have been able to kind of track. So what leaders do differently? Here's what is coming. First, they measure before they target. They don't commit to a reduction percentage before they know their baseline. Measurement is the foundation. Everything else follows from it. Now, there might be, a science-based target that comes in second. Okay, so they're setting that science-based target, and it might be that they're going for a 30% reduction by 2030 to be in line with that, and that's fine. But that's an arbitrary round number, and it doesn't really mean anything without a baseline and a validated methodology. So you need to set those commitments in context. And it doesn't always matter if you don't know exactly how you're going to achieve it. You need to have a reasonable expectation that you can achieve it, and have some options on the table that will get you there. And in 99% of the cases, particularly in scope 1 and 2, that is absolutely doable. When it comes to some of the harder to decarbonize areas, those tend to sit in scope 3 for a lot of organizations, unless you're an airline. So I think that's something really, really critical to think about. Third, they are reporting with rigor. The reporting framework determines whether buyers and investors trust that number. So get that rigor in. Is it aligned to ISO? Is it aligned to SBTI? Is it CSRD compliant? Is it meeting the SECR government reporting requirement in the UK for your annual accounts? Is that all in there? Is it really rigorous? Okay, really important. Fourth, they embed carbon into commercial decisions. So procurement. Are you asking your suppliers for their numbers? Are you making decisions and judgments on which suppliers you want to use today or planning for tomorrow and down the line around that? Are you being strategic, or are you just going for what's the cheapest thing that I can get my hands on right now? And that might be where you're at in this particular moment, but that's a reactive, not a strategic position. So that fourth one, embedding that commercial decision-making piece is absolutely critical. Procurement, CapEx justification, pricing conversations, really important. I mean, if you're thinking about CapEx and you're thinking, right, what kit am I going to buy and install? And you haven't done the due diligence on thinking about, well, actually, what is the biggest area that I could affect with this amount of money that I have to invest? What's the ROI on all of these different options? if you haven't considered that effectively, then and you're just kind of going, well, sure, the man down the road there booked in some solar panels and he's doing all right. If that is your metric, you're kind of a sheep and not really a leader in this in this regard. And I would suggest that you have a think again. You can do this better. Okay. So pretty critical to think about there. Fifth, engaging your supply chain. Real engagement changes supplier behavior. Sending a questionnaire once a year is not engagement, it's data collection. You need to have conversations. You need to engage in a meaningful way with your supply chain. Understand where they're at, understand what their thinking is. If you're not, they don't know that you really care about it. They're maybe not going to do what you need them to do on this. You're both going to be at risk. Okay. The resilience is built through that engagement piece. Okay. Really, really, really important. And that, of course, comes with knowing who do I need to engage most? Let's go back to those commercial decisions. Have you really thought about um, where the carbon is? Have you thought about which are the most intensive suppliers? Do you know that? Have you thought about who you spend the most with? Really, really important to work all out. What's business critical? What's not? Sixth, they are using carbon performance as a commercial asset. So because you've done all that work to optimize your business, to track and record and report on what you're doing in a verified, auditable way, you now have a commercial asset. This is something that you can use in tender responses, in investor relations, customer conversations. That measurement becomes your credential. And that's where a lot of the value is here. Okay, let's make it real. So, fantastic company here in Northern Ireland that we work with is the Camlin Group. We've been working with them for a long time now. When we began, they had done nothing in terms of measuring carbon emissions. They were very much at the outset of the journey. Um, as a company, they design and manufacture technology for the energy and rail sector. And I think it was fair to say when we started working with them, they had ambition around sustainability, but they didn't have a baseline. They didn't have any measurement rigor. And over 2 years, they achieved a 56% reduction in scope one and two emissions, a 78.1% reduction in scope three intensity, and identified significant cost savings. Okay. And they've asked me not to share the exact figure, but it is significant. And because reducing carbon reveals operational inefficiency, this was one of the key areas that they were able to look at. And because they started looking at that in greater detail, they also started thinking about the commercial terms that they had, and they had greater visibility of all those things, and they were able to negotiate much better positions on everything. So the commercial outcome, well, for them, just this month, they've been acquired by Siemens Energy. And a significant part of that was down to the material performance being evidenced in their carbon performance. And that was a key part of pass go with even getting that sort of investor coming on board. So really, really important. That's been a huge game changer for this company. Their growth plans are absolutely astronomical, multi-million pound contract that's come in on that. So really exciting piece of business growth happening. And crucial to that has been the optimization of the business. It's been the due diligence and the rigor and the trust that business has been able to do. And carbon has threaded right the way throughout that. And they've been able to show now how that is going to track forwards for that business to reduce risk over the longer term in order to improve performance over the longer term, and how they're going to remove themselves from as much geopolitical volatility as they can, how they can build that trust with their buyers around product carbon footprinting, and how they essentially make their buyers' lives easier, make their investors' lives easier, and as a result, they're a super investable prospect, hence what has occurred for them. So if that doesn't convince you that this is something to consider commercially, I don't know what will. But that is a fantastic result for Camlin. So, in the words of the client, a sustainable mindset is fundamental to us at Camlin. Not only is it the right thing to do, but we consider it essential in creating new opportunities, driving improved performance, and future growth. So, yes, they're saying it's the right thing to do for the environment, for the world. We can see that out there, as we said at the outset. But actually, this is about business too. This is about new opportunities for innovation, performance, growth. That's really, really important. Okay. What would the equivalent quote look like that for somebody in this room? Would you be able to say to a customer, an investor, or an inquirer or acquirer, we've got this level of measurement, we've got this level of rigor. This is the transition from carbon as a compliance obligation to carbon as a commercial asset. Where are you on that journey? So, the new business triangle, cost, quality, and carbon. So, for the last part of this session, I just want to kind of reintroduce this triangle. This is a framework that I've been developing in my work and with my clients. For me, it's the most useful way that I know to conceptualize where carbon fits into a business's commercial strategy. You can think about like a wobbly stool. If you've got two legs, it doesn't really stand up. If you get three, you're pretty stable, okay? And I think if you've got these three legs, your business is going to be stable going forwards. So those three dimensions, well, traditional business thinking certainly evaluates competitive performance across those two axes, cost and quality. But the organizations that are winning in the current environment have added a third dimension, and that is carbon. So they're not just asking, are we cost competitive? Are we quality assured? They're asking, can we prove our carbon performance? Buyers, investors, regulators are now scoring all three. The organizations that perform credibly on all three are pulling away from those that only manage two. You wouldn't dream of going to a board meeting or an investor conference without presenting your annual accounts on your financial performance that has been audited by somebody credible. And if you were buying somebody, you wouldn't dream of doing that without seeing that documentation firsthand yourself. And the same is going for carbon. Okay. Really, really important. So cost efficiency, quality assurance, carbon performance, this is that new business triangle. The organizations that have figured it out are doing it because whilst they may believe it's a moral case to do so, they're doing it because it's commercially rational to do so. Okay, you can have both. So the questions every leader should be asking. I want to close with these 6 questions. They are not rhetorical. I want you to think about them seriously. Your honest answers will tell you exactly where your organization sits on this journey and what your most important next move is. Measurement. Do you know your scope 1, 2, and 3 carbon footprint? Not approximately, but accurately. Have you calculated your supply chain emissions and identified the areas that can save you cost and carbon? Which of your customers will ask you for carbon data in the next 12 months? And are you ready for that conversation? What tariffs and compliance requirements are coming into force in the next 12 months? And are you ready? Can you prove your carbon performance to a buyer, an investor, or a lender? Is it independently verified with auditable data? So measurement, exposure, and evidence. Are you happy with where you're at on all of these things? If you're not, do get in touch. Um, Either with myself or with Brona and the rest of the Institute of Sustainability Studies team. There is a dearth of fantastic content for you to go through and get skilled up on at the Institute. And if you want a quick 30-minute free impact assessment call to see where you're at on some of these things, um, please get in touch with me. I'd love to have a chat. Details are on the screen, but I think maybe we go now to some Q&A.
Yeah, and we'll distribute the slides as well, so everyone will get the contact details there too. But thanks for that, Ben. Very insightful, very interesting. During that, we got a couple of questions in so far, but if anyone else has any, just pop them into the chat too. So we got one from Paul, which is, what is the regulatory structure on the carbon offset and carbon credit market? There is much duplicity and double counting in this area. What is the expectation of effective tightening of the assessments for actual and proven offsets against projections and penalties if this is not adhered to?
Yeah, so this is all around the emissions trading scheme. Okay. And it's critical. And it goes back to what I was mentioning previously around trust. Can you prove what you are saying? Have you got evidence? Have you actually measured it, or is it an estimate? Can you point to where the data is coming from? Okay. And I think that is one of the most critical areas of innovation that's going to be coming through in the next period of time. I know there's a consultation out there from ISO at the moment around a new net zero standard, which is understanding not just how do we calculate things, but also how do we, how do we measure things? Where do we get the data from? What's the right standard for all of that? Because there's certainly, um, let's say there's a spectrum, Paul, on what is good and what is not so good out there. And I think that really needs pulled in. But there's a lot of money being made or not made on being smart on carbon credits. I think that is going to be a very interesting area to pay attention to moving forwards. And yeah, we'll see how all that goes the closer we get to 2030. But um, it is, kind of an early and emergent area, Paul, I would also say. So um, maybe give it a bit of time before putting too much harsh judgment on it. I think this is worth considering as something that is agile. This is going to be iterative and improve over time. I don't think accounting in general was maybe right instantly or is fully right today. There is always going to be fraud. There is always going to be people that are looking for loopholes and exploiting those. So it's going to be impossible to fully rule that out. But I do think that things will certainly improve over time. And even where things are at right now, I think there is a testing of the waters with things like CBAM, trying to make it real in some sectors, particularly anybody that's using steel, aluminium, fertilizer, cement. If you're not across CBAM, you need to be. There's a lot of money to be saved if you're across the detail and you can evidence the detail around the emissions at source. Um, and if not, you have significant financial exposure moving forwards. So that supply chain engagement piece is absolutely critical.
And just a follow-up again here from Paul, based on what you were saying. Is there an EU focus to provide some listing of preferred carbon credit and offset providers?
Um, there are some kind of market leaders out there at the moment. I'm hesitant to recommend anybody specifically, but I think, yeah, my recommendation is do some due diligence yourself. The EU has not kind of come out with a definitive here's who you should use, here's who you should not use list that I'm aware of. But anybody that is registered effectively um, on the emissions trading scheme um, and is providing verified credits within that is worth a look at. It'll not take you too much Googling to find out who's involved in that.
Okay, and then another one here from Rob. So, what approach did Camlin Group take when cleaning up Scope 3? Where did the comms come from, managing director, and how did suppliers in their value chain react? Any examples would be great.
Okay, so for Scope 3, This began with us doing quite a detailed review of Camlin's supply chain list, with a spend-based assessment initially, and then really working through and prioritizing where the key areas of material interest were going to be within that. So we did that as a study, and then we worked with Camlin to really explore that further and look at who they were going to want to focus with first and why. And then we facilitated engagement with those suppliers. And those suppliers, because of who we selected, they had some skin in the game. They were happy to be engaged by their buyer. They wanted to make their buyer happy. And because of how the engagement went down, it was not do this or else. It was here's a shared opportunity. Let's go on a journey together. Let's see how we can make each other more resilient and stronger and more competitive in that process. And let's start with data on all of that. So that really was the basis for it. I think there's very few suppliers that don't want a constructive conversation with their buyer. Everybody that I have ever met in business wants their buyer to be happy. They want more buyers that are happy. That is what growth is really built on. That's your product market fit. And if your buyer is engaging with you directly to help you understand more of what's going to make them happy, that is gold dust to you as a supplier. And I think framing it in that way is really important. It's a do with rather than a do to. It's an opportunity rather than a burden. Yes, there's going to be work involved, but sure, what opportunity doesn't have a bit of work involved in it? And is the reward at the end of it? Absolutely. So I think it's about really articulating that, making a very commercial case for that conversation, um, and considering the data in underneath everything before you get to that point. Absolutely critical. They didn't just kind of rush out there and just kind of go willy-nilly. They were very strategic and methodical about it. And I think that's critical to it. And that's why a couple of slides ago, I was kind of pointing at, some of the things that people do differently. Measure first. Okay. Really, really important. Measure first, embed in decisions. Okay. Then engage. Okay. And that was really, really important in the Camlin story. Okay. So just bear that in mind. This is absolutely a live conversation ongoing. But I'd also say, the window of opportunity to get some commercial advantage is closing because people are taking action on this. And if you're not, others are getting that commercial advantage in efficiency, in getting closer to buyer requirements, or they've got their supply chain more resilient as a process, and you haven't yet because you haven't started the conversation or you haven't started the data analysis yet to even begin the conversation with any sense of um, basis. So that's what I'd take away from that. Okay.
And Scherzer here is just asking about with slide 7, how can organizations reduce carbon related risks that are mentioned in that slide? The slide 7.
Slide 7. Okay, how can you reduce risk? By
Carbon
reducing
related risks. Yeah.
carbon-related risks. Okay, well, CBAM is a carbon-related risk. Okay, if you have data from your supplier that is in scope on CBAM and it's verified auditable data, you will pay a lower tariff. Simple as that. If you don't have that, you will pay a higher tariff. There's your risk. And if you're buying millions of pounds or millions of euros worth of that commodity, and you could be saving 30 to 40% on that. That's a significant commercial risk against your competitor who is engaging on that. So there's that. SECR, if you don't comply by having measured effectively your scope 1 and 2 emissions and reporting that in your company accounts, I think there's a £50,000 fine for those that don't comply. For CSRD, I think it's a percentage of your turnover that you get fined. I need to double check because things have changed slightly, but the figure that I have in my head is 10%, which is a significant number for people. So, how do you reduce risk? That's some risk on the regulatory end. The other risk is the risk to what you sell. Okay. If you're not ahead of the curve on what your buyer needs, and your buyer says, listen, it's been great working with you, but we now really also need to know what the embodied carbon is within your product. And you're not able to say, listen, here's my product carbon footprint. And your competitor is able to say, here's my product carbon footprint. Your revenue is at risk. Okay. How much do you earn from that buyer? Okay. If you are a supermarket supplier, okay, and the supermarket says, we'd like to put you higher up the shelf, but are you SBTI certified? Have you moved from EcoVadis, bronze up towards silver or gold? Have you got a product carbon footprint? If you don't have those things, your revenue is at risk because you're maybe not going to hit the kind of sales that you need for that conversation, or you might get in the door initially, but you might not have done enough. Maybe you don't get the next tender, this kind of thing. So your revenue is at risk and increasingly at risk if you're not engaging on these things. So depends what your turnover is. If your turnover, like if your revenue coming in is £10 million, okay, and 80% of that is from large business, 80% of your revenue is at risk right now. Okay, that's £8 million of risk. Boom. So there we go. Hopefully that answers that.
Yeah, and then just I know we're kind of over time, so if anyone needs to pop off, no worries. We'll be sending out the recording. But just another one here from Paul. This will be the last one, Ben.
Sure.
How does the adherence to this EU requirement affect our international suppliers, particularly US?
Sorry, say that one more time.
Yeah, how does the adherence to this EU requirement affect our international suppliers, particularly US? So Paul was asking before about kind of carbon credits and stuff, if you remember,
Yeah.
and offset providers and all that kind of stuff.
So there's probably some context that's needed to really
Mm.
answer that.
Yeah,
Paul, depends what they're supplying, partly. Um, and it depends so yeah, it depends. Is this a
yeah.
CBAM type of supplier that's coming from outside the EU? Is
He just
this
said, is there likely to be tit for tat attitudes?
um
Maybe if you could provide a bit more context, Paul, just in terms of like what Ben said, what you're supplying and stuff, it might just help get a better answer.
or is this more around like, is America not going to do anything and therefore they're maybe not going to supply over here, or because there's too much regulation, or is that a kind of market forces trade
Oh, he
war
said
kind of a
exactly. He said exactly that.
yeah, okay. Well, the States needs the EU market because they produce a lot of services and goods that we buy. So if they want to sell over here, they're going to have to comply over here. Now, are they going to try and hike tariffs up in retaliation? I mean, who knows what's in the mind of Donald Trump on any given day? So is that beyond the realms of possibility? No. Um, but does he blink? He does. He does blink. So I let's see how that plays out, Paul. I think in subsequent years, post-Trump, should such a thing occur, um, the pendulum may swing back on that one. And I would imagine a lot of companies are preparing for that too.
Paul just left a cheeky. Could you post that on X? So there you go.
It's my most diplomatic answer on that poll.
But with that in mind, sure, we'll wrap up anyway, because we've gone over time. So thanks again, Ben, for all your insights and for the valuable presentation as well. It was brilliant. And thanks everyone for joining us as well. We'll be sending out the recording and the slides shortly, so you'll get that and you'll be able to revisit it. And if you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate to reach out to us at ISS or to Ben directly. His details are on here as well. But yeah, have a lovely day. Enjoy the sunshine as much as you can, and stay tuned for our next events as well.